One thing that I don't think that people understand is that Sealand wouldn't be a single location, but would be having many moving parts. Unlike a terrestrial city, we could move if the weather changed or we over neutralized a location. Here's a concept of a land moving city, but our moving cities would look more like this. Though there are other concepts for seasteading. Like I said, the first thing we would need to purchase is a sand barge. This would not be tied to one location, but would move around harvesting sand. The other key starting component would be a housing crane structure like this, a housing boat. There is a pyramid that we would need to be successful. The first is talented people. The second is artificial intelligence. And the third is blockchain. We would be growing our own food as opposed to purchasing food from the shelf. We would start this by having floating solar panels or photovoltaics, which would not be tied to one location, but would move with the currents. Attached to those would be fish farms, which would act as sea anchors, which would keep the solar panels from floating around quite as fast. We would also have floating mushroom farms, and finally, floating cricket farms. We would also plant mangrove trees and a thing called a mangrove date. We would also grow many fruit trees, but these would need to be planted in one location. Primarily, we would grow citrus trees, lemons, limes, and grapefruit, but also tropical fruit trees like bananas and pineapples. Another key technology would be a rain catchment system. Of course, we would be harvesting the roofs, but we would even catch the gutter rain water so that it doesn't mix back in to the ocean water. We would also have 3D farming, which would again not be tied to one place, but would move where needed. Distilled water is the one big limiting factor. But we could do that both through solar powered and through actual solar distillation. This would allow agriculture, which is the growing of phytoplankton and planktic algae. Now we would do this two ways. One, we would distill the water and then add a culture. And then we would also just take sampling of seawater and see what grew. We would, in the cultured section, add zooplankton, which would allow a more natural kelp or plankton, which would then be fed to grass shrimp, which come in both fresh and salt waters. Those would then be fed to Atlantic herring and round Sardinia, which would then be fed to the Atlantic salmon. One key thing we would do is saltwater agriculture, or aquaculture, which would not be mobile. We would have to have that in barns and piping systems and such. But there are things like lentils, cabbage, lettuce that all can grow on seawater, which would then support saltwater fish. And so there would be a full saltwater aquaponics system. Another technology is wave power. Wave power comes in many different types. Some is tied to the sea floor, but other types floats with the waves. Throughout the day, we would be getting solar power, but during the night, we would turn that back in by using pump hydro storage. As I said, aquaculture is key, growing algae, which would then be fed to the glass shrimp and crickets, which would then be fed to the feeder fish, sardines, and black salties, and also to freshwater prawns. This would allow us to feed the larger species not in a pen, but actually in fish runs that would be miles long. And those apex predators would be Atlantic salmon and king mackerel. Now, to reach these, we would use a totally solar-powered boat, which I would build one, but you could also purchase them from places like you can get a Vita Lion or the Marion M800 Spider. But there is a commercial one that is more efficient, and for transporting from sea to land, we would purchase one of their boats. Thanks for listening. My next video will be on the Battle of Chavis Yar. My name is William Morgan. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell.